Hello, welcome to Uncommon Leadership. I'm Michael Hunter with Uncommon Teams. Today I'm talking with Chandler Cutler. Chandler embarked on his entrepreneurial journey at just 21. In the 2 decades since, he has mastered the art of leadership, communication, and resilience, facing real world business challenges head on, culminating in the founding of CorEthos. Chandler and CorEthos emphasize the humanity behind every business operation. They help you transform your business with a people first approach that keeps humanity at the core while ensuring long term commitment and transparent communication as they collaborate on your path to elevate and scale your business. Welcome, Chandler.
Thanks so much, Michael. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you here today. In your journey to seeing people as people and learning to leverage their unique gifts to best accomplish your goals, when did you first recognize this might be a valuable approach?
Yeah, good question. So I think it would have started in a previous life when I was working in construction. It's a very authoritative space, very driven by, uh, you know, do what I say, don't ask questions, just get it done, and whatever the stakes. And I think learning to include and participate with everyone that's working on the site. And I think now more than ever, and I think it's more apparent in the workspace to recognize that everyone has unique gifts, unique opinions, unique perspectives that should be listened to, considered, and included in the ongoing or next steps that are involved in what's going to get accomplished, specifically when you're working with people uniquely trained and have unique experiences within a space that you're hiring for today with the gig economy and looking to work with independent contractors and more solopreneurs than ever before. You're bringing them in as professionals and as experts within those fields that allow them to offer their insights, and listening to them and leveraging those skills, those skill sets, those experiences really allows that lift and that scale most efficiently and most effectively. We find anyway.
How do you help teams who maybe aren't used to being asked to bring their most efficient, most effective, most themselves self into that workplace? How do you help teams start doing that?
That's yeah, great question. And I think a lot of that comes with building relationships, taking time, taking moments to build trust and explore those connections and those opportunities to learn from one another. And I know that in a lot of instances, the pushback is we don't have time to learn about every nuance of every team member, and totally fair and reasonable rebuttal. The issue with that is that if you don't take the time as a manager, as someone leading a team, you don't really know that team, and you don't know who's uniquely capable and willing to participate in a higher level or at a higher level to excel that project forward with tenacity or with grit or with any type of getting down into it and doing the heavy lifting that needs to get done to maybe get that project across the finish line in alignment with the expectations that are sort of set out from the onset. And that's where we see a lot of the trips or troubles that many of our clients face is just, you may know the answer, your team may know the answer, but you're not taking the time to map it out and create that plan in allowing everyone to recognize, realize, and fully understand the plan and their part in that plan so that they can take accountability for getting those things across the line. And where we're seeing the challenge and the frustration point, and this is leading to the quiet quitting that many people were speaking of at the end of COVID, in as much as I don't feel heard, I don't feel listened, I don't feel valued, I don't understand my where I fit in. I'm just a cog in the wheel, I'm just a number. And I think, for the teams that are seeing the success and seeing the involvement and seeing um, the value come from their teams isn't from the, what everyone points to for Google with the ping pong table or the beanbag chairs or the this or the that. It's really building those relationships and having those that accountability for those team members to really push those things through. Did that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Do you have specific tools or techniques that you find tend to work well to help start those relationships building?
Yeah, for sure. So I think um collaborative structured events, meetings, and not death by meeting. We don't need to be meeting on every single topic, but when we have meetings, make them meaningful, make them a space for vulnerability, open sharing. It's not a space for criticism, it's a space for building upon ideas and suggestions and thoughts. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in a boardroom. It can be, in a setting such as this. It can be in a setting that's an offsite. It can be in a cafe. It can be in a park that's around the corner from the office. It doesn't need to always be in the same place, but the importance is listening and taking time and moments and letting everyone know that, there are no bad ideas. Everyone's ideas are listened to. They may not be actioned, but they're heard. And bits and pieces of everyone's participation and involvement get included, and then recognize those bits and pieces of involvement and inclusion, give credit to the people that helped formulate those ideas and plans, create that roadmap, and make sure that everyone understands it, sees it, and is able to carry it forward. So that's, I mean, that's one of many, but really creating inclusion and making sure that there's participation from everyone in creating those guiding lights that you're following.
How do you encourage that participation?
That's a tricky one, right? In especially when people have, for lack of a better term, a trauma from a previous experience or a previous manager or a previous teammate that sort of stood in the way of that voice being heard, or maybe never being asked before. It's always easier to opt out than opt in. So I think it's being aware and attentive, having active listening during those sessions where you're together, and recognizing when those team members aren't necessarily maybe participating, and either looking to include them in the conversation in some way without calling them out. And if you're concerned about that, we never want to embarrass. That's never a tool that we want to leverage. So maybe after a meeting, you're able to connect with them and have a one-on-one session and just try to pull at those strings that maybe they're looking to participate with. And in the next meeting, asking if it's okay if you share those ideas and thoughts from the conversation, the one-on-one, and looking to build them in, and looking to lift those uh, individuals on the team that aren't as open or extroverted with their communication, working with someone like myself, where you're able to bring us in and facilitate those types of discussions, in positive manners, to build up the confidence to be participatory, and create that culture that you're looking to have at the end of the project to roll into your next sprint.
I like that idea a lot of you're encouraging participation during the meeting, not forcing it. Some people aren't comfortable talking yet or haven't had enough time to understand what they want to say yet. And then you follow up with at least the people who didn't speak up in the meeting, maybe with everyone afterwards, when everyone has had time to think through what they want to say. And you're talking to them one on one, so it's hopefully a much less scary environment than speaking up in the big meeting.
Right, exactly. And I think curiosity plays a part in that, right? And leaving assumptions, leaving ego at the door, and being willing to just ask the question, hey, and I noticed that there are some areas that I thought you were really strong in that you didn't speak into. Do you want to share any thoughts or ideas with me now in that one-on-one? And you know, just curiosity. Maybe there's something going on at home. Maybe there's something going on outside of office. There's always the potential for, and let's not assume that we know everything that's going on because they don't share it at the office. And it doesn't mean you have to pry. You can professionally be open about challenges that you're experiencing without being unprofessional or exposing yourself um, to something that might embarrass you. Um, but I think as managers, one of the things that I always point to is team members don't necessarily leave a job for many reasons outside of they don't have a good relationship with their manager. And there's a lot of science coming out speaking to bad managers, bad bosses, who are leaders, um, are more traumatic and more damaging to your mental health than anything else. And spending time in those environments that, and in all fairness, maybe the managers just aren't good leaders, haven't had training, and they aren't even aware that the words that they use or the way that they treat people are necessarily damaging and traumatic to their team members. But when you see attrition, when you see turnover within a team, you know, that lies at the foot of the leader. And I think that's not to say, that you don't know what you don't know. So being able to recognize that and work with the people that are leading those teams to facilitate that culture that you're looking to create within your space, that's a majority of the work that we do with many of the owner founders, department heads. In It's a lot of communication coaching and building with them in how to navigate those hard conversations.
What do you find is the most challenging for leaders who want to start building this relationship?
Um, it's unique to each, right? Some struggle with time management. Some struggle with creating the inclusive atmosphere. Some struggle with um, laying out expectations. I mean, it's all some form of communication in some way or another. Uh, but being able to recognize those blind spots, ask for feedback from your team, you know, without feeling like you're lacking in self-confidence. It's 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 actually a sign and a trait of strength to ask for feedback, ask for help, ask for um, suggestions and directions on what you can do better. And it's also a sign of vulnerability and trust that you're looking to get that feedback. Sometimes that feedback comes unsolicited, and sometimes those words cut and they're hard to listen to, but don't get defensive. It was probably incredibly difficult for that. Well, it depends on the scenario. Sometimes it's quite easy, but getting that feedback and taking that in, taking the good, leaving the bad. You don't want to fill your backpack with rocks, but you do want to sort of, you know, I felt like you were really coming down on me in that meeting when I suggested this idea, and you could feel like you weren't being critical at all, but pause, take a moment, and put yourself in their shoes or in their position, and imagine how it could have felt having your leader, your boss, your head, um, you know, criticizing your comments, your suggestions, your idea, if you're not one that openly offers that feedback or those suggestions, that was a really big trust exercise for you to speak up and lay it out. It may not have been the most brilliant. Maybe you didn't pick the best words, but you're really struggling to, put yourself out there. So be willing to hear those ideas, hear those considerations, and hear those suggestions and build on them. The whole theory of improv, the yes and perspective. Yes, that's a great idea, and maybe we could shape it in this way or present it in this way and build on, to create those bridges to trust and relationship rather than setting up those walls or building those barriers to prevent people from commenting and participating in those sessions.
I love yes and. It's I have yet to find a situation where it doesn't apply. It's
Exactly. Completely agree.
it's maybe one of the three exclusions to the rule of three, which would say there's at least three places where that doesn't apply. But this may be one of the three times where the rule of three doesn't apply.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always those blatant no's, but we try to stay away from definitives, right? Always, never. It's good to try to have that inclusivity and that collaborative method of shouldering beside someone rather than walking in front of or behind.
If I'd like to start helping my team become more open, more inclusive,
Mhm.
and I don't know where to start, what do you suggest I start with?
Yourself, always yourself. So look at um the things that scare you a little, the things that if you're really uncomfortable leading meetings, lead a meeting and identify that out the gate. Hey, it terrifies me to be up here in front of all of you and speaking, but it's something that I'm challenging myself, and I encourage everyone else to challenge themselves. You know, you're working with a team of developers, and maybe you're not completely familiar with Python or HTML or some sort of language that they're working with. Start learning that language and ask for advice and feedback and come to them with your problems. It's, you know, it's very rare that you find someone that's an expert in a space that isn't willing to share their knowledge. Um, provided that it's reasonable and they have time and they've set the time aside to have that conversation, be respectful. But that's a good way to start bridging those gaps with your team is asking for advice, being vulnerable, and looking to allow them to help you build yourself up into a better leader.
That seems like a ninja trick. Going to your team, each person on your team, and asking them to help you with something that you know they are great at, because you are being vulnerable and asking for help and acknowledging their expertise all at the same time.
Mhm. Yep, it's incredible. The quietest mouse on the team all of a sudden starts roaring like a lion, and that's what you want, right? You want those meetings to be boisterous and noisy, because that's when everyone's contributing and participating, and no one's sitting there with their guard up that they're going to get unduly criticized or think that their feedback, their suggestion, their recommendation is undue. And that's really where you get the best creativity, the best ideas, the fastest execution. Um, you know, you want to have all of those ideas out on the table um, when you're planning and building.
So now say that as a leader, I'm starting doing this. we're starting a great, and I start getting overwhelmed with how much participation I'm getting in meetings or how many suggestions and ideas I'm getting outside of meetings. How do I rein this in without reining in the enthusiasm uh, and excitement?
For sure. And again, I think a lot of meetings are good on rabbit holes. They get caught up in um, going through conversations and discussions and things that may not necessarily be relevant to everyone that's been invited to participate in a particular meeting. And I think if you have a schedule, you have an agenda that's shared. You're able to speak to those points, and if you've allotted a certain amount of time to discuss a certain detail and you're running over because there's so much participation, um, feel free to reconnect outside of that dedicated time that you've set for that meeting so that it doesn't run over time, and you make sure that those ideas are getting captured, but you're not wasting anyone's time at sitting through a conversation that they're not necessarily as excited about or as participatory with it, allowing for um, that time to be recaptured and invested in a better way, and also maintaining the flow and excitement, because when you get that lift from that participation, that can carry over into other areas, and you want to sort of keep that momentum happening.
Yeah, thank you. Now, if when I start being vulnerable with my team and the reactions I'm experiencing are not acceptance or excitement or even neutrality, but anger or antagonism, or I don't, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't know how to handle this. I don't want this. How can I as a leader show up the way that I want to and also help that work for people who don't want that?
Good, good question. And I think it's a tricky one to navigate, right? Especially when you're getting emotions and feelings tied into a response that you weren't expecting. So being able to um, focus on the individual that is getting a little agitated or uncomfortable with the situation, you can pause the meeting and say, you know what, this is going a direction that I'm not necessarily comfortable with. We have a couple or more items to cover. If everyone wants to put a pin in this and come back to it, tomorrow, next week, we can do that. Otherwise, let's reconnect on this specifically, one-on-one after the meeting, and we can sort it out, or maybe we can set a time, tomorrow. A 24-hour rule is always a good thing to just allow people to diffuse, reflect, um, and take a moment to sort of think about the incident. Maybe there was a miscommunication, maybe there was a misunderstanding, um, but that's typically where nobody, very few people want to come off unprofessional in a professional environment. Um, and especially if your team is curated in the way that it should, and the culture is the way that it should, having those um, outbursts, or having the team members that aren't able to um, emotionally present themselves appropriately. Um, those are things that need to get managed outside of a group environment, right? The whole concept of praise in public, criticize in private, that's definitely something that would be employed in such a scenario. But diffusing is always, the path that we would recommend, but definitely a tricky scenario to navigate for sure.
That brings us back to what we talked about earlier of meeting with the person one on one afterwards and being curious about what was going on for them. How can I help you be more comfortable with whatever was going on and work through that so that you can be the helpful and productive part of the team that I know you want to be?
Yeah, exactly. I think a majority of the time, in the moment, without being able to have a direct dialogue, and sort of an unveiled dialogue with the individual, you know, leave the ego and the assumptions at the door, and just have a curious conversation, and get to the why of why the reaction was what it was, or the lack of reaction was what it was, and dig into that and build that relationship and those trust. Some of the best friends that you have throughout your life are the ones that you fought with the most at the front end of your relationship. Those battles and those challenges are what build the binding fibers of relationships. I very adamantly encourage digging for conflict, or mining for conflict with our team members. And the idea and the concept behind that is to build that trust that even if we're upset with each other, we're going to be upset. Let me rephrase that. Even if we're upset, we're not upset with each other. We're upset with what we're discussing, the concept, what was proposed, the idea. We're not actually upset with, I don't have any lack of respect or lack of appreciation for you as an individual. There's that deep love and appreciation for what you offer to the team, and what you bring to the table. And I think being willing to sit in that conflict is such a rare experience today, because everybody wants to be comfortable, and hey, I get that, you know but relationships and strong working teams aren't born outside of conflict. And calm seas does not a good sailor make, right? You need the challenges, and the butting of heads, and the I see it this way, well, I see it this way, well, and you need to sort of tear it apart and put it back together again. And there needs to be trust that that's okay. And I can disagree with you as my boss, my leader, my director, and still maintain my job tomorrow. It's a willingness to have dissent in an idea or concept, and being able to have trust that the person on the other side of the table is going to listen, hear, reflect, and have a conversation around why they're making the decision that they're making to carry forward. And as long as everyone agrees that, that decision is the best decision, or they can get behind that decision, then they're able to move forward. It's when there isn't that conflict, and everyone's just sort of nodding their head, yep, 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 yep. That's when you get the breakdown in execution, because the next time someone passes someone in the hall, it's going to be, can you believe that they suggested this, and this is what's going on? And that's indicative of a broken culture or relationship within that particular team, because there isn't that trust to identify and advocate for their ideas or their suggestions.
And if I know that, or I suspect that what we're about to talk about in this meeting, or even the next item on the agenda, is likely to bring up these kind of reactions, I can remind the team of what our working agreements are, or even just say right now, like whatever's going on the next 10 minutes, like stays in this room. It's what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in this conference room stays in this conference room.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take things personally. I hope that you don't either. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it. And like you said, at the end of the meeting, we're all still this team that enjoys working together, and we're going to do what it takes to keep that outlook and feelings with each other.
I think I think when that needs to be said, that's that's a bit of a concern, right? When you need to sort of voice that out front, and it's not just understood in the midst of the meeting, there's some backroom chatter that's going on, and some maybe some commiseration, and so when I come into meetings, and come into teams and come into businesses that I'm working with, one thing that absolutely has to be recognized is that praise goes down, criticism goes up. There's no lateral conversations, because if there's lateral conversations around criticism, then that's indicative of that toxic culture, and it becomes a real problem, because it's indicative of a leader, a manager, a boss that isn't willing to listen or hear, or lacks trust that those criticism, that feedback is going to be heard, and not only heard but actioned, because that's sort of that pivotal step. It's all great to be the one that everyone wants to talk to, but if you never do anything with the information, you're really not bettering the cause. You're just commiserating, or gossiping. So that's a tricky one for me. And I think where I see a better relationship is where you see team members openly criticizing in caring ways. So hey, Michael, I really disagree with that point of view for this reason, this reason, this reason. And it's not, God, you're such an ass. It's there's validity and counterpoints to what that looks like. Focusing on the idea, the concept, the what's being discussed, rather than the individual. Um, so while I'm all well and good to, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, the reality is that when that's the spoken word, that's not the reality. That's the spoken word. It's saying, hey, you know, we're going to say some things in this meeting that I don't trust to be said outside of this room, and that should never be said. If you're not willing to say it, at a company wide meeting, you shouldn't be willing to say it within a conference room, in a meeting room. And, you know, that's a bit of a tricky concept for many people to grab onto and participate with. But, you know, um, you want to create a culture and an environment where gossip is not allowed, commiseration is not allowed, or not even not allowed, but not tolerated. And someone commiserates with someone on a situation, excuse me, maybe they just need someone to hear them, just to get it off their chest, and that's fine. But at the same time, the feedback from the person listening needs to be, hey, have you spoken to John or Susan about this issue? Like, because it sounds like you're really hurt. And if the response isn't, I just needed to be heard to so that I know that I'm not crazy, and now I can go talk to them, then that's great. But if it's no, they won't listen, it won't get action, I talked to them about this, that, the other thing, that's when you have a problem that needs to sort of get managed, and that leader needs to sort of work on their communication.
I was just thinking, we're back again to communications, which is what you said is at the root of everything.
it's surprising how often um, communication manifests in so many different ways. You know, and that's a real challenge. I was working with a client the other day who said, you know, Chandler, how do you market your services? How do you find new clients? Because, you know, you really have to go in and say, hey, um, what you have here is a communication problem. You're not communicating well, and nobody wants to hear that. So how do you navigate that? And it's, you know, it's a tricky one. I'll tell you. But I mean, it manifests in when you're leading a team. They You set a deadline, and that deadline gets missed. You're leading a team and you have expectations around how a project or a report is going to be filed, given, presented, and it doesn't meet your expectations. It manifests in, you know, you had this amazing team member that always crossed all the T's and dotted the lowercase J's, and now they're coming up short on everything. It manifests in, you know, you're the person that you got hired with at the same time got the promotion and you didn't. And it none of that at face value anyone would say, hey, there's a communication problem there. But you know, that's really where it is. Do you have blind spots where you're not asking for feedback? Have you discussed what happened with that high performing team member that is no longer, you know, hitting the mark? Did you paint done and explain clearly who was going to do what, when it was going to be due, and what it was going to look like when it gets completed? Those are all communication mechanisms and systems that need to be in place for successful teams to rise to the occasion and succeed. And that's where that communication point circles full circle.
Absolutely. What else should I ask you today, Chandler?
The power of curiosity, I think, would be one. I was going through some of your previous guests in preparation for our conversation. It was surprising how often curiosity came up, and I think that is, you know, along with grit, tenacity, curiosity is a skill, and a power, superpower, you know, to be willing to be curious about why something didn't turn out the way that it should have, to be curious about why someone's behaving the way that they are, to be curious about how something works the way that it does. You know, it unlocks and opens so many doors. So, you know, I think um, curiosity is something that ties very nicely with communication for, you know, becoming a better leader, creating that work culture that you want to be working within, and accelerating or scaling that business that you're looking to work within.
Yeah. Curiosity is core to who I am. It's something that just pervades everything. It's one of the reasons I do these interviews,
Of course.
because I am curious how successful leaders like you got that way, what your journey has been like, and how you help your teams and the people that you work with to be successful.
Hmm. No, for sure. And I think, yeah, I think that's one tenet that everyone can use a little bit more of. You know, I marvel at my three soon to be 4-year-old and her degree of curiosity and why we lose that as we age. You know, the playfulness and the willingness to just dive full body, full self into anything and just learn and listen and participate and you know, as much as everyone sort of discourages it, pushing that red button, that, you know, you you just you got to know what it does. And I think I think curiosity is one of those things that really needs to be embraced a lot more in work culture.
Yeah. And now I'm curious to hear more about the gifts you have for our audience.
Sure. Um, so one is speaking to work culture and being able to it's a quick bullet point item that we sort of put together that really if you're hitting all of those points and you're leveraging those consistently, you will see a deep resolve in how your team collaborates, communicates, and engages in what you're looking to achieve. So, I mean, that is for me. I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to look at it, but I really appreciate everything that's been sort of put together there. And then I believe the other one is setting up agendas for meetings and being able to share with your team your expectations for what you're going to connect on, how you're going to connect on it, and what it's going to look like on the other side. So being able to have an agenda set in place, how to frame it out, how to look for to include everyone in participating in building that agenda so that everyone's voice is heard, and then being able to go through the meeting and come out the other side with something tangible, and being able to have an understanding of what the actual items are out of that session, and then who's going to accomplish it, how it's going to get done, when it's going to be ready for review, and what that's going to look like to set that project and that task, whatever you were meeting about, up for success.
Those are great. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
If people would like to contact you to learn more about how you work with teams, inquire into how their communication challenges, and curious about how they might be able to have you help them, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, best way would probably be through the website, corethos.com. And then alternatively, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always open for communication. And at CorEthos on any platform comes to me and our team. So we'd love to hear from you, and we're always open for a conversation.
Great. And I'll have all those links, including your downloads in the show notes.
Perfect. Thank you.
What would you like to leave our audience with today?
I think that curiosity point, and being willing and open to allowing that bit to be curious and learn a little bit about someone in your office or someone on your team or someone just in your life. Reach out to them, let them know that you appreciate a certain aspect or something about their work style or them as a person, and open that door to that communication and that curiosity about how you could maybe better show up for them, and what that bit of support would look like, I think um, is what I'd like to leave. Lifting your head up a little bit and seeing who's around you, and experiencing those relationships a little bit deeper, to create that connective tissue and build that team and that culture that maybe you'd like to see a little bit more of in your space.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you for a great conversation today, Chandler.
It was a pleasure, Michael. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. And thank you, audience, for being here with us today. And Chandler and I are curious. What are you curious about from everything we talked about today? How can we help you refine your communication skills? Give us a email, LinkedIn message, and let us know. Thanks, and have a great day. Thanks for joining us on Uncommon Leadership today. If you found these stories interesting, inspiring, and illuminating, sign up for my newsletter. Hop over to uncommonteams.com and use the form at the top of every page. You'll be the first to know about every new episode of Uncommon Leadership. You'll also discover how you can build uncommon teams. If you'd like to chat about doing that yourself, email me, michael@uncommonteams.com, or use the contact form on my website. Thanks so much.